Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to Battles of the American Civil War with your host, Bang and Dang, and we moved on to the big one.
Uh-oh.
The Battle of Fredericksburg. This is a nice, technically 5-day battle, 11th to the 15th of December.
That's a big one.
In the cold. And a big one for the Eastern Theater for sure, but we got the heavy hitters here. Ulysses S. Grant, Lee, Rosecrans, Buell, McClellan.
Oh, shit.
Burnside, Hooker, Halleck. Well, he's not doing nothing but sitting back.
Right.
Of course, we got all the Confederates, Jackson, both AP and D.H. Hill and all those guys on the other side. Shaping up to be a big one. It's going to be a long one, too. This is probably going to be over an hour episode, at least close to it. We got December 11th to the 15th. In and around Fredericksburg, Virginia, was the battle in the Eastern Theater of the war. November 1862, Abraham Lincoln needed to demonstrate the success of the Union war effort before the Northern public lost confidence in his administration. Confederate armies had been on the move earlier in the fall, invading Kentucky and Maryland. Although each had been turned back, these armies remained intact and capable of further action. Yeah, because McClellan's a bitch and didn't pursue them.
This guy.
Lincoln urged Major General Ulysses S. Grant to advance against the Confederate stronghold of Vicksburg, Mississippi. He ain't ready for Vicksburg yet.
Look at that shit. Well, Grant replaced Major General Buell with Major General William Rosecrans. We know that. Hoping for more aggressive posture against the Confederates in Tennessee. And on the 5th of November, seeing that his replacement Buell had not stimulated Major General George McClellan into action, he issued orders to replace McClellan to replace McClellan in command of the Army of the Potomac in Virginia. McClellan had stopped Robert E. Lee's forces at the Battle of Antietam in Maryland, which we all remember, but had not been able to destroy Lee's army, nor did he pursue Lee back into Virginia aggressively enough for President Lincoln.
Yeah, well, he got replaced by Ambrose Burnside, who was the commander of the 9th Corps. Burnside had established a reputation as an independent commander with successful operations earlier that year in North Carolina, and unlike McClellan, had no apparent political ambitions. However, he felt himself unqualified for Army-level command and objected when offered the position. He accepted only when it was made clear to him that McClellan would be replaced in any event and that an alternative choice for command was Major General Joseph Hooker, whom Burnside disliked and distrusted. So he was like, I guess I'll take it. And he did on November 7th.
Right. Well, Hooker wasn't all that bad, though.
Well,
In response to prodding from Lincoln and General-in-Chief Major General Henry Halleck, Burnside planned a late fall offensive. He communicated his plan to Halleck on 9th of November. The plan relied on quick movement and deception. He would concentrate his army in a visible fashion near Warrenton, feigning a movement of Culpeper Courthouse. That was an Orange Courthouse or Gordon's Courthouse. So one of those three, huh?
or Gordonsville, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, Gordonsville. He would then rapidly shift his army southeast and cross the Rappahannock River to Fredericksburg, hoping that Lee would not move. Unclear as to Burnside's intentions, while the Union Army made a rapid movement against Richmond, south along the Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac Railroad from Fredericksburg.
Right.
Okay.
So they want to go through Fredericksburg and then go to Richmond. Burnside selected this plan because he was concerned that if he were to move directly south from Warrenton, he would be exposed to a flanking attack from Lieutenant General.
Right. See, you know, to mess
Thomas
with Stonewall.
Stonewall
Nobody wants to mess
Jackson.
with Stonewall still. They're like, nah.
Well, his corps was at that time in the Shenandoah Valley south of Winchester. He also believed that the Orange and Alexandria Railroad would be an inadequate supply line.
Right.
Burnside was also influenced by plans McClellan began developing just prior to being relieved. Where that Lee had blocked the O&A, McClellan considered a route through Fredericksburg and ordered a small group of cavalry commanded by Captain Ulrich Dahlgren to investigate the condition of the railroad.
Look at McClellan leaving one piece of good stuff behind.
Right. Finally did something, huh?
While Burnside began assembling his supply base. at Falmouth, near Fredericksburg, the Lincoln administration undertook a lengthy debate about the wisdom of his plan, which differed from the president's preference of a movement south on the O&A and a direct confrontation with Lee's army, instead of the movement focused on the city of Richmond. Right? It's a good plan, too.
Well,
Lincoln reluctantly approved the plan on 14th November, but cautioned his general to move with great speed, certainly doubting that Lee would react as Burnside anticipated.
Right.
I mean, you can't be fucking around. You got to go.
Unit Army began marching on November 15th, and the first elements arrived in Falmouth on November 17th. Burnside's plan went quickly awry, and he had ordered pontoon bridges to be sent out to the front and assembled for his quick crossing of the Rappahannock. But because of his administrative bungling, the bridges did not arrive on time.
Of course they didn't.
Burnside first demanded the pontoon bridging, along with many other provisions, on November 7th when he detailed his plan to Halleck.
Clearly.
The plan was sent to the attention of Brigadier General George Washington Cullum, who was the chief of staff in Washington, which was received on November 9th. So, still 6 days before they even started marching. Why didn't they have them?
Right. Plans called for both riverine and overland movement of the pontoon trains to Falmouth. 14th November, the 50th New York Engineers reported the pontoons were ready to move, except for a lack of 270 horses needed to move them. We're ready to go except for the horses.
Except for how they're going to get moved.
Unknown to Burnside, most of the bridging was still on the upper Potomac. Communications between Burnside staff engineer Cyrus B. Comstock and the engineer brigade commander Daniel P. Woodbury indicate that Burnside had assumed the bridging was en route to Washington based on orders given on November 6th. Well, you were wrong.
Right. Well, as Major General Edwin V. Sumner arrived, he strongly urged an immediate crossing of the river to scatter the token Confederate force of 500 men, which was in the town and occupying the commanding heights to the west. Burnside became anxious, concerned that the increasing autumn rains would make the fording points unusable, that Sumner might be cut off and destroyed, ordering Sumner to wait in Falmouth. He said, now he's being cautious.
Huh. Lee, at first, anticipated that Burnside would beat him across the Rappahannock, and that to protect Richmond, he would assume the next defensible position to the south, the North Anna River. But when he saw how slowly Burnside was moving and the Confederate President Jefferson Davis expressed reservations about planning for a battle so close to Richmond,
right,
he directed all of his army toward Fredericksburg. Damn, he's like, everybody go.
Mm-hmm.
November 23rd, the corps commanded by Lieutenant General James Longstreet had arrived. Lee placed them on the ridge known as Mary's Heights to the west of town, with Anderson's division on the far left, McLaws directly behind the town, and Pickett's and Hood's to the right. There's Pickett, too. We'll see him in Gettysburg.
Pickett. He sent for Jackson on November 26th, but his 2nd Corps commander had anticipated the need and began forced marching his troops from Winchester on November 22nd. Hey, look at Jackson was finally ready this time, huh?
Right. Look at that
He covered as many as 20 miles a day. Jackson arrived at Lee's headquarters on November 29th, and his divisions were deployed to prevent Burnside crossing downstream from Fredericksburg.
Fantastic.
D.H. Hill's division moved to Port Royal, 18 miles downriver. Jubal Early's 12 miles down the river at Skinkler's Neck. A.P. Hill's at Thomas Yerby's house, the Belvoir, about 6 miles southeast of town, and Taliaferro's along the R.F.P. Railroad, which was 4 miles south at Guinea Station. That's racist.
Fantastic, right. The boats and equipment for a single pontoon bridge arrived at Falmouth on 25th of November, much too late to enable the Army of Potomac to cross the river without opposition.
Right.
Burnside still had an opportunity, however, because by then he was facing only half of Lee's army, not yet dug in, and if he acted quickly, he might have been able to attack Longstreet and defeat him before Jackson arrived.
Keyword if.
Once again, he squandered his opportunity.
Jeez, what is up with these guys?
The full complement of bridges arrived at the end of the month, but by this time Jackson was present and Longstreet was preparing strong defenses. They're like, go ahead. I dare you.
Do it.
Cross that line.
Well, Burnside originally planned to cross his army east of Fredericksburg at Skinker's Neck, but an advance movement by federal gunboats to there was fired upon and drew Early and D.H. Hill's divisions into that area, a movement spotted by Union balloon observers.
Uh-oh.
Now, assuming that Lee had anticipated his plan, Burnside guessed that the Confederates had weakened their left and the center to concentrate against him on their right. So he decided to cross directly at Fredericksburg. December 9th, he wrote to Halleck, I think now the enemy will be more surprised by a crossing immediately in our front than any other part of the river. I'm convinced that a large force of the enemy is now concentrated at Port Royal. It's left resting on Fredericksburg, which we hope to turn.
Uh-oh. In addition to his numerical advantage in troop strength, Burnside also had the advantage of knowing his army could not be attacked effectively. On the other side of the Rappahannock, 220 artillery pieces had been located on the ridge known as Stafford Heights to prevent Lee's army from mounting any major counterattacks. Dude, these artillery guys are killing Confederates.
Well, Burnside organized his Army of the Potomac into 3 so-called grand divisions, organizations that included infantry, corps, cavalry, and artillery, comprising 120,000 men, of whom 114 would be engaged in the coming battle.
Hey.
The Right Grand Division, commanded by Major General Edwin Bull Sumner, consisted of the 2nd Corps of Major General Darius N. Couch, which had divisions of Major Generals Winfield Hancock, Oliver Howard, and William French, and the 9th Corps of the Brigadier General Orlando B. Wilcox, which had divisions of Brigadier Generals William Burns, Samuel Sturgis, and George Getty.
Hey.
And then he had a cavalry division under Brigadier General Alfred Pleasington.
Fantastic.
That was attached.
Right, great. Well, the Center Grand Division, commanded by Major General Joseph Hooker, consisted of 3rd Corps Brigadier General George Stroman, divisions of Brigadier General David B. Birney, Daniel Sickles, and Emil Whipple. There was the 5th Corps of Major General Daniel Butterfield, who had divisions of Brigadier General Charles Griffin, Andrew Humphreys, Major General George Sykes. The Cavalry Brigade, under Brigadier General William W. Averill, was attached as well. The Left Grand Division, commanded by Major General William B. Franklin, consisted of the 1st Corps of Major General John Reynolds. Divisions were Brigadier General Abner Doubleday and John Gibbon, and Major General George Meade. Hey, look at Meade up in here. The 6th Corps were there with Major General William Baldy Smith. He had divisions of command with Brigadier General William Brooks, Albion Howe, and John Newton. Hey. Cavalry Brigade, commanded by Brigadier General George Bayard, was also attached.
Dude, these are, wow.
Reserve, commanded by Major General Franz Siegel of the 11th Corps, was in the area of Fairfax Courthouse. Hey, there's Fairfax Courthouse. 12th Corps under Major General Henry Slocum was called from Harper's Ferry, Dumfries, Virginia. Dumfries, Virginia. Dumfries?
Dumfries.
Give me some Dumfries. He was called there to join the reserve force on December 9th, but none of these troops participated in the battle.
I don't think they needed them. Meanwhile, Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia had nearly 79,000 men, with 72.5 engaged.
Nice.
His organization of the Army and Corps was approved by an act of Confederate Congress on November 6, 1862, consisted of 1st Corps Lieutenant General James Longstreet, included divisions of Major Generals Lafayette McLaws, Richard Anderson, George Pickett, and John Hood, as well as Brigadier General Robert Ransom, Jr.
There's some good generals in there.
Yeah, 2nd Corps of Lieutenant General Stonewall Jackson included divisions of his divisions, man.
Yep.
AP and D.H. Hill, Brigadier Generals Jubal Early, and William Taliaferro. Yeah, dude. Jackson's had this like the whole war.
Right.
He knows who those people are. Reserve Artillery under Brigadier General William N. Pendleton, and the Cavalry Division under Major General Jeb Stewart.
You know, he's got his cavalry guys.
Mm-hmm. The two armies at Fredericksburg represented the largest number of armed men that ever confronted each other for combat during the Civil War. No, it was only 112 versus 75.
That's a
It
lot.
had to have been more than that at Gettysburg.
200,000? About the same, probably. Union engineers began to assemble 6 pontoon bridges before dawn on December 11th. 2 just north of the town center, a 3rd one in southern end of town, and 3 more farther south.
The Confederates are just watching them do
Near
this?
the confluence of Rappahannock and Run Deep.
Or Deep Run.
Right, yeah, Deep Run. The engineers constructing the bridge directly across from the city came under punishing fire from Confederate
I'm
sharpshooters.
sure they did.
Primarily from the Mississippi Brigade of Brigadier General William Barksdale, in command of the town defenses. Union artillery attempted to dislodge the sharpshooters, but the positions in the cellars of houses rendered the fire from 150 guns mostly ineffective.
Wow, look at it. Smart, huh? Well, eventually Burnside's artillery commander, Brigadier General Henry Hunt, convinced him to send infantry landing parties over in the pontoon boats to secure a small bridgehead and rout the sharpshooters. Colonel Norman Hall volunteered his brigade for this assignment. Burnside suddenly turned reluctant, lamenting to Hall in front of his men that the effort meant death to most of those who should undertake the voyage. Just the point, though.
Right.
When his men responded to Hall's request with 3 chairs, Burnside relented. Look, they want to. 3 p.m., the Union artillery began a preparatory bombardment, and 135 infantrymen from the 7th Michigan and the 19th Massachusetts crowded into the small boats, and the 20th Massachusetts followed soon after.
Did it. Well, they then crossed successfully and spread out in a skirmish line to clear the sharpshooters. Although some of the Confederates surrendered, fighting proceeded street by street through the town.
Nice.
As the engineers completed the bridges. Sumner's, that's pretty badass. That's like a video game.
Right.
Sumner's Right Grand Division. Hold off then while we finish this
Why is
bridge.
there no Civil War video games?
There's one.
Yeah.
I have it for Xbox, but I lost it, so I don't have it. And I can't find it anywhere.
They should do a Call of Duty. That'd be awesome.
That was one of What's It Too Bad. I think it was History Channel's Battles of the American Civil War or some shit. Or History Channel's Civil War.
Probably wasn't that good.
It wasn't bad.
Yeah.
It was Xbox.
Right.
Maybe 360. I don't even know if it was that. Sumner's right Grand Division began crossing at about 4:30 p.m., but the bulk of his men did not cross until December 12th. Hooker's Central Grand Division crossed on the 13th of December, using both the northern and southern bridges. Good for you guys.
Well, the clearing of the city's buildings by Sumner's infantry and by artillery fire from across the river began the first major urban combat of both the war and American history.
Oh, shit.
We're in the city, baby. Union gunners sent more than 5,000 shells against the town and the ridges to the west. By nightfall, 4 brigades of Union troops occupied the town, which they looted with a fury that had not been seen in the war up to that point.
Wow.
This behavior enraged Lee, who compared their depredations with those of ancient Vandals.
Right.
The destruction also angered the Confederate troops, many of whom were native Virginians.
Right.
Many on the Union side were also shocked by the destruction inflicted on Fredericksburg. Civilian casualties were unusually low given the widespread violence, though, and George Rabel, whoever that is, estimates no more than 4 civilian deaths.
Wow. But still, they just came in there and just destroyed. That's some dirty shit there.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
River crossings south of the city by Franklin's left Grand Division were much less eventful. Both bridges were completed by 11 a.m. on the 11th of December, while 5 batteries of Union artillery suppressed most sniper fire against the engineers. Franklin was ordered at 4 p.m. to cross his entire command, but only a single brigade was sent out before dark. Crossings resumed at dawn and were completed by 1 p.m. That was on the 12th of December. Early on the 13th of December, Jackson recalled his divisions under Jubal Early and D.H. Hill from downriver positions to join his main defensive line south of the city. It's like, I want you boys up here.
Need you up here. Burnside's verbal instructions on December 12th outlined a main attack by Franklin, supported by Hooker on the southern flank, while Sumner made a secondary attack on the northern flank. His actual orders on December 13th were vague and confusing to his subordinates. 5 p.m. on December 12th, he made a cursory inspection of the southern flank, where Franklin and his subordinates pressed him to give definite orders for a morning attack by the Grand Division, so they would have adequate time to position their forces overnight. However, Burnside demurred, and the order did not reach Franklin until 7:15 or 7:45 a.m., one of the two, and Burnside's moron.
Well, when it finally arrived, it was not as Franklin expected. As usual, how things like this has been going. Wow, it just keeps on going and going. I mean, it's getting a little better since, 2.5 years in?
Not really.
But it's not. Wow. Rather than ordering an attack by the entire Grand Division of almost 60,000 men, Franklin was to keep his men in position, but was to send a division at least to seize the high ground. Just send something up there.
At least a division.
And they're calling that Prospect Hill, and that was around Hamilton's Crossing. Sumner was to send one division through the city and up Telegraph Road. You think it was Telegraph Road because of telegraph lines?
I'm assuming, right? Right. It's like Main Street.
Hell of a name. And both flanks were to be prepared to commit their entire commands. Burnside was apparently expecting these weak attacks to intimidate Lee. Yeah, Burnside, you're an idiot. Causing him to withdraw. Franklin, he's not. If he's anything like McClellan, all we have to do is
fake march. And then he'll get
I
scared.
just learned that Stonewall Jackson's there. We move out. Let's go.
Right.
Back to Washington. We need a new plan. Franklin, who had originally advocated for vigorous assault, chose to interpret Burnside's order very conservatively. Brigadier General James Hardee, who delivered the order, did not ensure that Burnside's intentions were understood by Franklin, and map inaccuracies about the road network made those intentions unclear. Furthermore, Burnside's choice of the verb to seize was less forceful in 19th century military terminology than order to carry the heights.
December 13th began cold and overcast. A dense fog blanketed the ground and made it impossible for the armies to see each other. Franklin ordered his First Corps commander, Major General John Reynolds, to select a division for their attack. Reynolds chose his smallest division, which is about 4,500 men, commanded by Major General George Meade, and assigned Brigadier General John Gibbons' division to support him. His reserve division under Major General Abner Doubleday was to face south and protect the left flank between the Richmond Road and the river. Meade's division began moving out at 8:30 a.m., with Gibbon following behind, and around 10:30 a.m., the fog started lifting.
Uh-oh.
So we could see you.
They then moved parallel to the river initially, turning right to face the Richmond Road, where they began to be struck by enfilading fire from the Virginia Horse Artillery under Major General Pelham. Pelham started with 2 cannons, a 12-pounder Napoleon smoothbore and a rifled Blakely, but continued with one after the latter was disabled by counter-battery fire.
Nice.
Jeb Stuart sent word to Pelham that he should feel free to withdraw from his dangerous position at any time, to which Pelham responded, "Tell the general I can hold my ground."
Look at you.
The Iron Brigade, formerly Gibbon's command, but now led by Brigadier General Solomon Meredith, was sent out to deal with the Confederate horse artillery. This action was mainly conducted by the 24th Michigan Infantry. Hey! Go Blue! A newly enlisted regiment that had joined the brigade in October. They're like, we're new guys. What's going on? You're about to die.
Yeah, get out there. But after about an hour, Pelham's ammunition began to run low, and he withdrew. Well, you couldn't hold your position then.
Right.
General Lee observed the action and commented about Pelham. He says that he's age 24. He says, it's glorious to see such courage in one so young.
Right.
Good for him.
Right.
The most prominent victim of Pelham's fire was Brigadier General George Bayard, a cavalry general mortally wounded by a shell while standing in reserve near Franklin's headquarters.
Poor guy.
Jackson's main artillery batteries had remained silent in the fog during this exchange, but the Union troops soon began to receive direct fire from Prospect Hill, principally 5 batteries directed by Lieutenant Colonel Reuben Lindsay Walker, and Meade's attack was stalled about 600 yards from his initial objective for almost 2 hours by these combined artillery attacks.
Look at the Confederates doing some artillery attacks.
Right.
The Union artillery fire was lifted as Meade's men moved forward around 1 p.m. Jackson's force of 35,000 remained concealed on the wooded ridge to Meade's front. His formidable defensive line had an unseen flaw. In A.P. Hill's division line, a triangular patch of the woods that extended beyond the railroad was swampy and covered with thick underbrush, and the Confederates had left a 600-yard gap between this.
You can't do that.
Wow. Brigadier General Maxcy Gregg's brigade stood about a quarter mile behind this gap. That's far. Meade's 1st Brigade, with Colonel William Sinclair, entered the gap, climbed a railroad embankment, turned to the right into the underbrush, striking Lane's brigade into the flank.
All right. Well, following immediately behind his 3rd Brigade, which was commanded by Brigadier General Feger Jackson, turned left and hit Archer's flank. 2nd Brigade, which was Albert L. Magleton's brigade, came up in support and intermixed with the leading brigades. As the gap widened with pressure on the flanks, thousands of Meade's men reached the top of the ridge and ran into Gregg's brigade.
Oh, man.
Many of these Confederates had stacked arms while taking cover from the Union artillery and were not expecting to be attacked at that moment, so were killed or captured unarmed. Wow.
Jeez.
Gregg at first mistook the Union soldiers for fleeing Confederate troops and ordered his men not to fire on them.
My goodness.
Oh, no.
What's going on here? While he rode promptly into the front of his lines, the partially deaf Gregg could not hear the approaching Federals or their bullets flying around him. In the confusion, a bullet struck his spine and fatally wounded him.
Maxcy Gregg, dead.
2 days later, dead. Colonel,
Wow.
Colonel Daniel Hamilton of the 1st South Carolina assumed command, but Gregg's brigade was totally routed and was no longer an organized unit for the rest of the day. Fire forever. Archer, meanwhile, was being pressed hard on his left flank and sent word for Gregg to reinforce him, unaware that he had been shot and his brigade had been disintegrated.
Wow.
The 19th Georgia's flag was captured by the adjutant of the 7th Pennsylvania Reserves.
Nice.
It was the only Confederate regimental flag captured and retained by the Army of Potomac in the battle.
Retained him. The Georgians broke and ran. The 14th Tennessee resisted the onslaught for a time before also breaking. A sizable number of its men were taken prisoner.
Yeah, you imagine that. We lost our flag. What?
Yeah.
Better not have your flag.
Better not be the commander of that division. Right. Archer frantically sent messages to the rear, calling on John Brockenbrough and Edmund Atkinson's brigade for help. With ammunition on both sides running low, hand-to-hand fighting ensued, with soldiers stabbing at each other with bayonets and using muskets as clubs.
I think this is when Confederates have the advantage.
Yeah. Most of the regimental officers on both sides went down as well. On the Confederate side, the 1st Tennessee went through 3 commanders in a matter of minutes.
Damn.
Meade's 15 regiments also lost most of their officers, although Meade himself survived the battle unscathed despite having been exposed to heavy artillery fire.
Damn.
Look at that shit, dude.
Confederate reserves, the divisions of Brigadier General Jubal Early and William Teleferro, moved into the fray from behind Gregg's original position. Inspired by their attack, regiments from Lane's and Archer's brigades rallied and formed a new defensive line in the gap.
Uh-oh, don't want them to do this.
Right. Now, Meade's men were receiving fire from 3 sides and could not withstand the pressure. Feger Jackson attempted to flank the Confederate battery, but after his horse was shot and he began to lay down foot, he was shot in the head by a volley and his brigade fell back, leaderless and scared. So Jackson, Joseph W. Fisher, will soon replace Jackson in command.
Well, to Meade's right, Gibbon's division prepared to move forward at 1 p.m. Brigadier General Nelson Taylor proposed to Gibbon that they supplement Meade's assault with a bayonet charge against Lane's position. However, Gibbons stated that this would violate his orders. Who gives a shit at this point?
Right.
So Taylor's brigade did not move forward until 1:30 p.m. The attack did not have the benefit of a gap to exploit, nor did the Union soldiers have any wooded cover for their advance.
Right.
So progress was slow under heavy fire from Lane's brigade and Confederate artillery.
Just walking into that shit.
Pretty much. Immediately following Taylor was the brigade of Colonel Peter Lyle, and the advance of the two brigades ground to a halt before they reached the railroad.
Crazy, man. Dude, battles in the American Civil War, Revolutionary War, wow. Freaking nuts. These guys just had to stand in lines and walk towards each other. It's just stupidity. Crazy.
Yep.
Committing his reserve at 1:45 p.m., Gibbons sent forward his brigade under Colonel Adrian Root, which moved through the survivors of the first two brigades, but they were soon brought to a halt as well. Eventually, some of the Federals reached the crest of the ridge and had some success during hand-to-hand fighting. Men on both sides had depleted their ammo and resorted to bayonets and rifle butts, and even empty rifles with bayonets thrown like javelins.
Jeez.
I'm going to throw it. That's still a weapon. Keep that son of a bitch. But they were forced to withdraw back across railroad embankment along with Meade's men to their left. Gibbons' attack, despite heavy casualties, had failed to support Meade's temporary breakthrough, and Gibbon himself was wounded when a shell fragment struck his right hand. Oh, so what?
Poor guy.
Brigadier General Nelson Taylor took over command of the division.
All right.
So, some shrapnel on the hand get you out of the war, huh?
A quote by Major General George Meade to Major General John Reynolds on the afternoon of 13th says, "My God, General Reynolds, did they think my division could whip Lee's whole army?" And General Lee has a quote about watching the carnage of the Confederate counterattack from the center of his line. He says, "It is well that war is so terrible, or we should grow too fond of it."
Right.
Yeah, don't want to grow too fond of that. After the battle, Meade complained that some of Gibbons' officers had not charged quickly enough, but his primary frustration was with Brigadier General David Birney, whose division of the Third Corps had been designated to support the attack as well.
Hey.
Well, Birney claimed that his men had been subjected to damaging artillery fire as they formed up, that he had not understood the importance of Meade's attack, and that Reynolds had not ordered his division forward.
Okay.
When Meade galloped to the rear to confront Birney with a string of fierce profanities that, in the words of one staff lieutenant, says almost makes the stones creep, he was finally able to order the brigadier forward under his own responsibility, but harbored resentment for weeks.
Hey.
By this time, however, it was too late to accomplish any further offensive action.
I mean, what are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
Early's division began a counterattack, led initially by Colonel Edmund N. Atkinson's Georgia Brigade, which inspired the men from the brigades of Colonel Robert Hoke, Brigadier General Archer, and Colonel John Brockenborough to charge forward out of the railroad ditches, driving Meade's men from the woods into disorderly retreat, followed closely by Gibbons. Early's orders to his brigades were to pursue as far as the railroad, but in the chaos, many kept up the pressure over the open fields as far as the old Richmond Road. Hey, whatever, man. If you can keep on making them run, right? Union artillery crews proceeded to unleash a blast of close-range canister
That's why
fire,
they said stop at the railroads.
firing as fast as they could as they can load their freaking guns.
Well, the Confederates were also struck by the leading brigade of Birney's belated advance, commanded by Brigadier General J.H. Hobart Ward. And then Birney followed up with the brigades of Brigadier Generals Hiram Berry and John Robinson, which broke the rebel advance that had threatened to drive the Union into the river.
Oh.
Colonel Atkinson was struck in the shoulder by a canister shot and abandoned by his own brigade.
Oh, shit.
Okay. Union soldiers later found and took him prisoner.
Oh, man.
Any further Confederate advance was deterred by the arrival of the 3rd Corps Division of Brigadier General Daniel Sickles, which was on the right.
All right. Well, General Burnside, who by this time was focused on his attacks on Mary's Height, was dismayed that his left flank attack had not achieved the success he assumed early in the day. He ordered Franklin to advance his right and in front. But despite repeated requests, Franklin said no, claiming that all of his forces had been engaged. He's like, I can't do anything. But this was not true, however, as the entire 6th Corps and Brigadier General Doubleday's division of the 1st Corps had been mostly idle, suffering only a few casualties from artillery fire while they waited in reserve. They're sitting there and they're still getting hit. Like, shit.
Burnside's like, Franklin's like, all my guys are engaged. Burnside's like looking around. There's all these guys just
They're playing cards.
Right? Like, what do you mean? Nope, they're all engaged. Trust me. The Confederates withdrew back to the safety of the hills south of town. Stonewall Jackson considered mounting a resumed counterattack. Federal artillery and impending darkness changed his mind.
Right.
Fortuitous Union breakthrough had been wasted because Franklin did not reinforce Meade's success with some of the 20,000 men standing in reserve.
Right.
Neither Franklin nor Reynolds took any personal involvement in the battle and were unable to are unavailable to their subordinates at the critical point.
Of course they were. Franklin's losses were about 5,000 casualties in comparison to Stonewall's Jackson's 3,400, demonstrating the ferocity of the fighting. Skirmishing and artillery duels continued until dark. No additional major attacks took place, though. While the center of the battle moved north to Mary's Height, Brigadier General George Bayard, who commanded a cavalry brigade in the 6th Corps, was struck in the leg by a shell fragment and died 2 days later. Damn.
Jeez.
As the fighting south of Fredericksburg died down, the air was filled with the screams of hundreds of wounded men and horses. Dry sage grass around them caught fire and burned many men alive.
Jeez.
Oh, wow.
Well, the northern end of the battlefield, Brigadier General William H. French's division of the 2nd Corps prepared to move forward, subjected to Confederate artillery fire that was descending on the fog-covered city of Fredericksburg.
Uh-oh.
General Burnside's orders to Major General Edwin Sumner, commander of the Right Grand Division, was to send a division or more to seize the high ground to the west of the city, right? Assuming that his assault on the southern end of the Confederate line would be the decisive action of the battle.
The avenue approach was very difficult, however. Mostly open fields, but interrupted by scattered houses, fences, gardens that would restrict the movement of battle lines. A canal stood about...
Gardens? I don't think gardens would.
Right.
I mean, I guess probably around fences and stuff themselves.
A canal stood about 200 yards west of the town, crossed by 3 narrow bridges, which would require the Union troops to funnel themselves into columns before proceeding.
Right. Bottlenecking it.
About 600 yards west of Fredericksburg was the low ridge known as Mary's Heights, rising 40 to 50 feet above the plain. Although known as Mary's Heights, the ridge was composed of several hills separated by ravines from north to south. Okay. You got Taylor's Hill, Stansbury's Hill, Mary's Hill, and Willis Hill.
What you talking about, Willis Hill?
Right. Near the crest of the portion of the ridge comprising Mary's Hill and Willis Hill, a narrow lane and a slight cut, the Telegraph Road, known after the battle as the Sunken Road, was protected by a 4-foot stone wall enhanced in places with log breastworks and abatis, making it a perfect infantry defensive position.
Right. Well, Confederate Major General Lafayette McLaws initially had about 2,000 men on the front line of Mary's Heights, and there were an additional 7,000 men in reserve on the crest and behind the ridge. Mass artillery provided almost uninterrupted coverage of the plain below. General Longstreet had been assured by his artillery commander, Lieutenant Colonel Edward Porter Alexander. He said, "General, we cover that ground now so well that we will comb it as with a fine-tooth comb.
Huh.
A chicken could not live in that field when we open on it."
Oh, shit.
Okay.
Fucking chicken. Fog lifted about 10 a.m. Sumner gave his order to advance an hour later. French's brigade under Brigadier General Nathan Kimball began to move around noon. They advanced slowly through heavy artillery fire, crossed the canal in columns over the narrow bridges, and formed in a line, with fixed bayonets behind the protection of a shallow bluff. In perfect line of battle, they advanced up the muddy slope until they were cut down at about 125 yards from the stone wall by repeated rifle volleys. Some soldiers were able to get as close as 40 yards, but having suffered severe casualties from both the artillery and infantry fire, the survivors clung to the ground. Kimball was severely wounded during this assault, and his brigade suffered 25% casualties. French's brigade under Colonel John Andrews and Colonel Oliver Palmer followed, with casualty rates of almost 50%.
Jeez.
Wow.
Sumner's original order called for the division of Brigadier General Winfield Hancock to support French, and Hancock sent forward his brigade under Colonel Samuel Zook, which was behind Palmer's. They met a similar fate. Next was this Irish brigade under Brigadier General Thomas Meagher, who, equipped with outdated Springfield muskets, cannot deliver effective volley until within not but 100 yards from the enemy. Yeah, that's not good.
Right, you gotta be super close with those.
Of the 1,200 Irishmen who made the charge, 545 would not return from the blood-soaked heights. Jeez. Hancock's final brigade was led by Brigadier General John Caldwell. Leading his 2 regiments on the left, Colonel Nelson A. Miles suggested to Caldwell that the practice of marching in formation, firing, and stopping to reload made the Union soldiers easy targets. Well, duh.
Right.
And that a concerted bayonet charge might be effective in carrying the works. Caldwell denied permission. Miles was struck by a bullet in the throat as he led his men to within 40 yards of the wall.
Shit.
Jeez. Where they were pinned down as their predecessors had been. Caldwell himself was soon struck by 2 bullets and put out of action.
Oh, shit. The commander of the 2nd Corps, Major General Darius Couch, was dismayed at the carnage wrought upon his 2 divisions in the hour of fighting, and like Colonel Miles, realized the tactics were not working.
Right.
He first considered a massive bayonet charge to overwhelm the defenders, but as he surveyed the front, he quickly realized that French's and Hancock's divisions were in no shape to move forward again. He next planned for his final division, commanded by Major General Oliver Howard, to swing to the right and attempt to envelop the Confederate left. But upon receiving an urgent request for help from French and Hancock, he sent Howard's men over and around the fallen troops instead.
Right. The brigade of Colonel Joshua Owen went in first, reinforced by Colonel Norman Hall's brigade, and then 2 regiments of Brigadier General Alfred Sully's brigade. The other corps in Sumner's right Grand Division was the 9th Corps, and he sent in one of its divisions under Brigadier General Samuel Sturgis. After 2 hours of desperate fight-in, 4 Union divisions had failed in the mission Burnside had originally assigned to 1. Jeez. Casualties were heavy. Second Corps losses for the afternoon were 4,114. Sturgis division had 1,011 of those. That's crazy. Jeez, oh, Pete.
Jeez, oh, Pete. While the Union Army paused, Longstreet reinforced his lines so that there were 4 ranks of infantrymen behind the stone wall. Brigadier General Thomas R. Cobb of Georgia, who had commanded the key sector of the line, was mortally wounded by an exploding artillery shell and was replaced. Brigadier General Joseph Kershaw came in control. General Lee expressed concerns to Longstreet about the massing troops breaking his line, but Longstreet assured his commander, "General, if you put every man on the other side of the Potomac on that field to approach me over the same line and give me plenty of ammo, I will kill them all before they reach my line."
You had a clear view.
Right.
If you look at that, I'm
Clear.
assuming they were this way and that a hill.
Or it's right, basically that down there. That's all. They can
Right.
see
But they're facing the hill, so they
Right.
can see everybody coming up from there, dude.
everything.
I mean, it's not happening.
It's over.
By mid-afternoon, Burnside had failed on both flanks to make progress against the Confederates. Rather than reconsidering his approach in the face of heavy casualties, he stubbornly decided to continue on the same path.
Look at that.
He sent orders to Franklin to renew the assault on the left, which, as described earlier, the left Grand Division commander ignored, and ordered his center Grand Division, commanded by Major General Hooker, to cross the Rappahannock into Fredericksburg and continue the attack on Mary's Heights.
Right.
Hooker performed a personal reconnaissance.
He went over there himself. He was like,
Something that neither Burnside nor Sumner had done, both remaining east of the river during the failed assaults. Of course they were. And returned to Burnside's headquarters to advise against the attack.
He's like, you know what? I mean, it sounded good, but I just went over there and
I don't think you want to.
Can somebody else do it?
Nonsense, poopy pants.
Right. Brigadier General Daniel Butterfield, commanding Hooker's 5th Corps, while waiting for Hooker to return from his conference with Burnside, sent his division under Brigadier General Charles Griffin to relieve Sturgis' men. By this time, Major General George Pickett's Confederate division and one of Major General John Bell Hood's brigades had marched north to reinforce Mary's Heights. Griffin smashed his 3 brigades against the Confederate position one by one. Also concerned about Sturgis, Couch sent 6 guns of Captain John G. Hazard's Battery B, which is the 1st Rhode Island Artillery, light artillery. He did that to about 150 yards of the Confederate line. That's all you need, right? 150 yards, get a good accurate.
Well, maybe.
But they were hit hard by Confederate sharpshooter and artillery fire and provided no effective relief to Sturgis. They're like, that didn't work.
A soldier in Hancock's division reported movement in the Confederate line that led some to believe that the enemy might be retreating. No. Why would they retreat?
No, there's no reason.
Despite the unlikeliness of this supposition, the 5th Corps Division of Brigadier General Andrew Humphreys was ordered to attack and capitalize on the situation. Capitalize on what?
Right.
Humphreys led his 1st Brigade on horseback with his men moving over and around falling troops with fixed bayonets and unloaded rifles. Wow. Some of the fallen men clutched at the passing pant legs, urging their comrades not to go forward, causing the brigade to become disorganized in their advance.
Right.
The charge reached to within 50 yards before being cut down by concentrated
They already knew, they're like,
fire.
dude, you're freaking target practice right now. Wow. Brigadier General George Sykes was ordered to move forward with his 5th Corps, and that was his regular Army division, to support Humphreys' retreat. But his men were caught in crossfire and pinned down. By 4 o'clock, Hooker had returned from his meeting with Burnside, having failed to convince the commanding general to abandon the attacks. While Humphreys was still attacking, Hooker reluctantly ordered the 9th Corps Division under Brigadier General George Getty to attack as well. He's like, attack.
Go, I guess.
Do. But this time, the leftmost portion of Mary's Heights, Willis Hill.
All right, new place, I guess.
Go over there. Colonel Rush Hawkins' brigade, followed by Colonel Edward Harlan's Brigade moved along an unfinished railroad line just north of Hazel Run, approaching close to the Confederate line without detection in the gathering twilight. Oh. But they were eventually detected, fired on, and repulsed.
Yeah.
It's like, I think we got them. No! Run!
Get out of here!
Get out of here!
7 Union divisions had been sent in, generally 1 brigade at a time, for a total of 14 individual charges, all of which failed. Oh, my. Costing them from 6,000 to 8,000 casualties.
Jeez.
Confederate losses at Marye's Heights totaled around 1,200. The falling of darkness and the pleas of Burnside's subordinates were enough to put an end to the attacks.
Right.
If you call them attacks. Longstreet later wrote, the charges had been desperate and bloody, but utterly hopeless.
All right.
Thousands of Union soldiers spent the cold December night on the fields leading to the heights, unable to move or assist with the wounded because of Confederate fire. That night, Burnside attempted to blame his subordinates for a disastrous attack, but they argued that it was entirely his fault and no one else's.
Right, it was Burnside's fault. This guy's a moron. Where's this leadership for the Union Army, man? Come on. During a dinner meeting the evening of 13th December, Burnside dramatically announced that he would personally lead his old 9th Corps in a one final attack on Marye's Heights.
Dude, give it up, would ya? What are you gonna do?
But his generals talked him out of the following morning.
He was hoping they would.
He was all drunk. You know what? I'll fucking take my guys off.
You want something done, you gotta do it yourself.
Get those damn rebs and end this war tonight. I'm like, all right. We will do that. And in the morning, they're like, dude, you're not playing that. You're doing that still. It's like, doing what? Oh, hell no. Are you out of your mind? It's crazy.
What, I look stupid?
What the hell? He's like, no, my armies are going to remain in position throughout the day. We ain't going nowhere. Well, that very afternoon on 14th of December, Burnside asked Lee for a truce to attend his wounded, which the latter granted. The next day, the Federal forces retreated across the river and campaign came to an end.
Testament to the extent of the carnage and suffering during the battle was the story of Richard and Roland Kirkland.
Which is so great by both sides that you got that time to go get your wounded. In World War II, there was no going back and get your wounded.
Yeah, sometimes there was.
Nah.
Yeah.
Nah.
Sometimes there was.
Nah.
You ever heard of the Christmas Day truce?
Yeah. I have.
Okay.
But it wasn't a whole war truce. It was just like
This isn't a
two
whole
brigades.
war. This isn't a whole war truce either.
Yeah, but it happens all the time.
Does it?
Always.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, but they played football in the Christmas truce against each other. It's good
Ain't that
stuff.
crazy?
Yeah.
Ain't that crazy?
Right.
I
Yeah.
should have ended the war right there.
Could have, but it didn't. Because then the very next day they started killing each other.
Right. He was so pissed off that he got that fucking 80-yard touchdown pass. That motherfucker.
Yeah, they probably put targets on people's heads. That dude intercepted me. He's going down tomorrow.
Right.
But anyways, the story of Richard Roland Kirkland, who was a Confederate Army sergeant with Company G, 2nd South Carolina Volunteer Infantry. He was stationed at the stone wall by the Succum Road below Marye's Heights. Kirkland had a close-up view to the suffering, and like so many others, was appalled at the cries for help of the Union wounded throughout the cold winter night of December 13th. After obtaining permission from his commander, Brigadier General Joseph Kershaw, Kirkland gathered canteens and in broad daylight, without the benefit of a ceasefire or a flag of truce, which was refused by Kershaw.
Right.
He provided water to numerous Union wounded lying on the field of battle.
No shit. Look at that. Union soldiers held their fire, as it was obvious what Kirkland's intent was. Kirkland was named the Angel of Marye's Heights for these actions, and is memorialized with a statue. By Felix Day Weldon on the Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park, where he carried out his actions.
I would assume it would be there.
Details of the story, first recorded in 1980,
Or 1880.
1880, conflict with multiple after-action reports, and may have been embellished and personalized for effect.
Of course it was.
Obviously. On the night of December 14th, the Northern Lights made an appearance. And it was unusual for this latitude, presumably caused by the largest solar flare ever.
Some might say it was the largest solar flare ever.
One witness described that the wonderful spectacle of the Aurora Borealis was seen in the Gulf states. Really?
Cool.
I've never seen them in Michigan.
Because you hardly can. You go up north, UP, they're there.
What I'm saying, but if you see them in, I wish I was around in 1862.
There's no light pollution, so you can see a
Very.
fucking whole lot of stuff.
Very true. The whole sky was a ruddy glow, as if from an enormous conflagration, but marked by the darting rays peculiar to the northern light. The event was noted in the diaries and letters of many soldiers at Fredericksburg, such as John W. Thompson, Jr. He wrote this. Louisiana sent those famous cosmopolitan zouaves called the Louisiana Tigers. And there were Florida troops who, undismayed in fire, stampeded the night after Fredericksburg, when the aurora borealis snapped and crackled over the field of the frozen dead, hard by the Rappahannock.
Wow, okay. The Union Army suffered 12,653 casualties, which was 1,284 killed, 9,600 wounded, 1,769 captured or missing.
That is nuts.
2 Union generals were mortally wounded. Here's the toast of that. Brigadier Generals George D. Bayard and Conrad Jackson. Confederate Army lost 5,377 men. Wow. Only 608 killed, 4,116 wounded, 653 captured or missing. Most of them in the early fighting on Jackson's front.
He says only.
Well, compared to the Union, yeah.
So altogether, 1,900. 1,900 people
Killed.
died.
Confederate Brigadier Generals Maxcy Gregg and T.R.R. Cobb were both mortally wounded as well. Casualties sustained by each army showed clearly how disastrous the Union's army tactics were. Yeah.
Right.
Although the fighting on the southern flank produced roughly equal casualties, about 4,000 Confederate, 5,000 Union, the northern flank was completely lopsided.
Right.
With about 8 Union casualties for each Confederate.
Right, yeah, dude.
They're just mowing them down.
Yeah, it was just the stupidest thing ever. They thought they can just keep on adding, we're weakening it.
Stupid.
No.
Burnside's men had suffered considerably more in the attack, originally meant as a diversion, than in his main effort.
Moron. The South erupted in jubilation over its great victory.
Of course it did.
The Richmond Examiner described it as a stunning defeat to the invader, a splendid victory to the defender of the sacred soil.
Ooh.
General Lee, normally
a little culty.
right. General Lee, normally reserved, was described by Charleston Mercury as jubilant, almost off balance, and seemingly desirous of embracing everyone who calls on him. Yes, come see me.
Oh, General Lee here.
He's like, not yet.
Jefferson Davis is looking at him like, what the fuck?
This motherfucker. The newspaper also exclaimed, General Lee knows his business, and the Army has yet to know such word as fail.
Well, that's a lie. But you think General Lee would have became the president?
Definitely.
Had the
All day
Confederate
long,
run?
dude. I don't know, because he didn't even really want to be in the war.
Well, it don't look like it.
Right.
Lee himself was not as pleased as the rest of the South, though, even though the other ones just contradict that.
Right. He was like,
He later wrote, at Fredericksburg, we gained a battle, inflicting very severe loss on the enemy in men and material. Our people were greatly elated. I was much depressed.
right.
We had really accomplished nothing.
Right.
We had not gained a foot of ground.
All right.
And I knew the enemy could easily replace the men he had lost.
Exactly.
And the loss of material was, if anything, rather beneficial to him, as it gave an opportunity to contractors to make money.
Exactly.
Look at this guy.
knows.
Already realizing the military industrial.
He knows he's fighting a losing battle, but he can't fight against Virginia. And Virginia's in the South. If Virginia would have been in the North, Lee would have been in the Northern.
Well, obviously.
His home is the Virginia.
Right.
And Virginia's in the South. And that's
But
what
look at him already bringing up the military industrial corporation,
Right.
fucking
Dude,
even
he-
in the 1800s.
He already knew what was happening in Pittsburgh and Philly and all those towns. He's like, these guys are doing something up there, boys. Yeah, but we got our farming to do. Well,
I'm talking about just him saying that the loss of
meant nothing, right?
Yeah, the loss of material was, if
nothing.
anything,
Right.
beneficial to the Union because it
Union.
gave an opportunity to contractors to make more money to make more shit,
Exactly.
sell more shit. So
Right.
and that's exactly what happens nowadays.
You're right. Well, reactions were very opposite in the North.
No shit.
Both the Army and the President Lincoln came under strong attacks from politicians and the press. The Cincinnati Commercial noted, it can hardly be in human nature for men to show more valor or generals to manifest less judgment than were perceptible on our side that day. Senator Zachariah Chandler, a radical Republican, wrote, the president is a weak man, too weak for the occasion. And those fool or traitor generals are wasting time and yet more precious blood in indecisive battles and delays. Pennsylvania Governor Andrew Curtin visited the White House after a trip to the battlefield. He told the president, it was not a battle. It was a butchery. What are you doing, Abe?
Don't worry,
We
Andrew.
want you to around.
Don't worry, Andrew Curtin. In about 8 months, you'll have your own butchery battlefield to visit in your own state there, bud. Curtin reported that the president was heartbroken at the recital and soon reached a state of nervous excitement bordering on insanity.
Right.
Lincoln himself wrote, If there is a worse place than hell, I am in it. Burnside was relieved of command a month later, should have been the day after, after an attempt to purge some of his subordinates from the army and the humiliating failure of his mud march in January, which we'll get to.
Right. Jeez, this guy. Burnside, I mean, he had a thing there for a minute, but...
Burnside had no upside.
Right. The Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park was established in 1927 under the War Department, transferred to the National Park Service in 1933. Consists of more than 8,300 acres that cover parts of 4 Civil War battlegrounds: Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania Courthouse, the Wilderness, and Chancellorsville.
I think we did Chancellorsville, but...
March 2003. Civil War Trust announced the beginning of a $12 million national campaign to preserve the historic Slaughter Pen Farm, a key part of the Fredericksburg battlefield. The 208-acre farm, locally known as the Pearson Tract, was the scene of the bloody struggle on December 13th, 1862.
Over this ground, federal troops under Major General George Meade and Gibbon launched their assault against Jackson's Confederates holding the southern portion of the Army of Northern Virginia's line at Fredericksburg. Despite suffering enormous casualties, the federal troops under Meade were able to temporarily penetrate the Confederate line and for a time represented the North's best chance of winning the battle. The fighting on the southern portion of the battlefield, later named the Slaughter Pen, produced 5,000 casualties and 5 Medal of Honor recipients.
No shit.
None of them from the Confederates.
Right.
Obviously. Slaughter Pen Farm was considered to be the largest remaining unprotected part of the Fredericksburg battlefield. Not no more, bitches!
Right. It is also the only place on the battlefield where a visitor can still follow the Union assault on the 13th December from beginning to end. Oh, I want to go there. Nearly all the other land associated with the Union attacks at Fredericksburg, either on the southern end of the battlefield or in front of Mary's Heights, has been degraded by development. Of course they have. The $12 million acquisition of the Slaughter Pen Farm at the Fredericksburg battlefield has been called the most ambitious nonprofit battlefield acquisition in American history.
Oh, good for them.
Too bad. You couldn't make no money off it, you pieces of fucking shit.
Oh, but they are.
Right.
Oh, but they are.
Right.
October 2006, the Department of the Interior awarded a $2 million grant based on the significance of the Slaughter Pen Farm.
Fantastic.
Money was provided through a U.S. congressional appropriation from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Fund supports non-federal efforts to acquire and preserve meaningful non-federal efforts. Why are these non-federal groups? Why aren't the federal government putting this in these lands anyways?
You know why. They're grooming Obama to be there so you can't have Civil War stuff.
The program is administered by the American Battlefield Protection Program. In addition, the Central Virginia Battlefield Trust committed $1 million towards Slaughter Pen Farm fundraising campaign.
Fantastic. In addition to the preservation of the Slaughter Pen Farm, the American Battlefield Trust and its partners have acquired and preserved an additional 51 acres of the battlefield and more than 5 other acquisitions.
Okay.
November 2012, during archaeological investigations at the construction site for a new courthouse, remains of Union artifacts were recovered. These included ammunition, smoking pipes, and food tins.
Good for them. And the Battle of Fredericksburg was depicted in the 2003 film Gods and Generals.
It was.
Based on the novel of the same name.
It's a great movie. You guys watch it about 4 hours long, but...
Which is a prequel of The Killer Angels.
Right.
Which the earlier film Gettysburg was adapted
and
from.
Gettysburg is fantastic. You should watch that as another 4-hour-long movie.
Both
but it's
the
great.
novel and the film focus primarily on the disastrous charges on Mary's Heights.
Yes.
With the movie highlighting the charges of Hancock's division of 2nd Corps, the Irish Brigade, all of them. Yeah. American author Louisa May Alcott fictionalized her experienced nurse and soldiers injured in the Battle of Fredericksburg in her book Hospital Sketches. That was released in 1863. Wow.
Fantastic.
American heavy metal band Iced Earth wrote a song inspired by the battle titled Clear the Way, December 13th, 1862. And included it in their 2017 album. Cool.
Awesome.
A reenactment of the battle by robotic soldiers serves as a tourist attraction in the novel Logan's Run.
Aw, that's cool.
Robotic soldiers. That's cool.
Fantastic. But I urge you guys to watch both those, not Gettysburg yet because we're not there, but watch Gods and Generals because it depicts Fredericksburg even better than what we just told you. It does not.
Almost as long. Shit.
Not even close. Not even close.
That's Battle of Fredericksburg. Like we said, it was, only an hour. It wasn't that long. But, yeah, they had them when they were fighting against Jackson's forces, but that stupid stone wall, the other stone wall, the actual stone wall, at Mary's Hill or whatever the hell it's called, they got fucked on that.
They messed up.
And Burnside's an idiot. He should have been resigned from the damn war.
If they would have kept on going against Stonewall's part, they could have actually overtook that Mary's Hill.
Could have.
And it would have been fantastic for the Union to attack. But they didn't do it. D is the guy.
He was a senator for Rhode Island and the governor right after the war.
Of course he was.
And died in 1881.
Of course he did.
Age only 57. Damn, so he was only 30 in the war.
Yeah, he's youngin'.
Crazy, man. That's crazy. Yep.
Crazy man.
That's Fredericksburg.
Yeah, Fredericksburg, man. It was a brutal battle. That was one of the first times where it was just openly, just brutally murdering people just walking towards you. Jeez. In the open fields. These Union guys, they didn't do things right.
No. Well, speaking of not doing things right, well, actually, the Union go on a nice little run here because we got the Battle of Kinston.
Oh, they're pissed.
In North Carolina, plus the Battle of Whitehall, also in North Carolina, plus the Battle of Goldsboro Bridge, also in North Carolina. Those are the 14th, 16th, and 17th. And we'll probably end up doing the Battle of Jackson, Tennessee as well, obviously in Tennessee on December 19th, 1862. And then we might even wrap it up with 4 after that, depending on how big this one is.
Yeah.
Nope, we'll wrap it up with 3 and then 1, which will end the year.
Yeah, we'll probably do all 4.
Maybe. Battle of Stones River is going to end the year, which is an A-class battle. In the meantime, go check out patreon.com/bangdang if you want to hear this episode without any ads. Well, this show in general without any ads, plus This Week in Sports History, plus Outlaws and Gunslingers. Speaking of Outlaws and Gunslingers, this week's episode is going to be about, I don't know yet. We haven't recorded it. Probably a guy that probably a military guy that killed his family on the military base and tried
stupid son of a bitch.
Tried blaming
Right.
drug addicts. And then
Garbage human being that guy is.
Right. We'll be back next week for probably 4 more battles. Oh, manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. Use the code TRUECRIME, and that'll get you that. Manscaped.com. And anything else I'm missing? Oh, yeah, go subscribe to our YouTube. We're trying to really build up here. Trying to post clips at least every day, every other day. Just search Bang Dang Podcast or Bang Dang Network on YouTube, and our channel will pop up there.
Pop up.
And
BDM, baby, BDM.
Subscribe to that, and we'll be back next week for more Battles of American Civil War. We are the Mouthy Michiganders with
Bang Dang.